Overweight my entire life, the kind of kid who was always picked last in gym class, who heard whispers and giggles behind my back in the cafeteria, who wore baggy clothes to hide my body even on the hottest summer days. My family never let me forget it either. My sister Melissa was the absolute golden child. She was tall, blonde, athletic, popular, everything I wasn't. She was the star volleyball player in high school who got a full scholarship to a prestigious university. She graduated with honors and landed a job at a top consulting firm right out of college. She dated the right kind of guys, from good families. She was the daughter my parents proudly showed off at family gatherings. I was the daughter they made excuses for. Oh, Emma's still figuring things out. Emma's always been our creative one. Emma just hasn't found her passion yet. All code for Emma's the fat, underachieving disappointment. Then came the day that would change everything. I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, pushing food around my plate while my mother fretted about the wedding planning for Melissa's upcoming nuptials to Bradley, her college sweetheart and literal Ken doll come to life. "The venue is gorgeous," my mother gushed. "Just the most beautiful garden setting with the stone pathway leading to the altar. Everyone will be watching as the bridal party walks down that path." She paused, her fork suspended in midair as she looked at me with that familiar mix of disappointment and calculation in her eyes. "Emma, honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "don't you think it might be time to think about getting in shape? The wedding is in 10 months, and as maid of honor, all eyes will be on you too." I felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. "Your sister has worked so hard to make this day perfect," my dad chimed in, not looking up from his plate. "We wouldn't want anything to distract from that." The implication was crystal clear. I was a potential embarrassment, a blemish on their perfect family photo. Melissa at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, but she didn't defend me. She never did. "The bridesmaid dresses are really beautiful," she offered weakly. "They come in all sizes, but maybe it would be easier to find one if you were a bit smaller." I felt something shift inside me that night. It wasn't motivation born from love or self-care. It was a burning rage and determination fueled by years of backhanded comments, sidelong glances, and the constant message that I wasn't good enough as I was. I left dinner early that night and walked the 3 miles back to my apartment instead of taking the bus. By the time I got home, I had a plan. The next day, I withdrew almost all my meager savings and hired a personal trainer. I found a nutritionist who worked on a sliding scale. I deleted all my food delivery apps and cleared out my pantry of processed foods. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. every morning to work out before my job, and I spent my lunch breaks walking instead of eating at my desk. It wasn't healthy, neither physically nor mentally. I was driven by spite, not self-love. I obsessed over every calorie, every pound, every inch. I pushed through pain, exhaustion, and hunger with a single thought: I'll show them. Around the same time, I also enrolled in night classes for digital marketing and web development. If I was going to transform myself, why stop at my body? My parents had always subtly compared my mediocre career to Melissa's stellar one. I was going to change that too. 6 months of grueling work later, I had lost 70 pounds. People at work started noticing. Men who had never given me a second glance suddenly found reasons to stop by my desk. Women who had previously excluded me from happy hours now eagerly invited me. It was eye-opening how differently the world treated me. And disgusting. 8 months in, I had lost over 100 pounds and completed my certification courses. I updated my LinkedIn profile with my new skills and a professional photo that showed my transformation. The wedding was now just 2 months away, and I hadn't seen my family in all this time. I'd made excuses to miss family gatherings, claiming work commitments or illness. I wanted the full impact of my transformation to hit them all at once. Then came the dress fitting. My mother had been texting me increasingly frantic messages about scheduling it, clearly anxious about what size to order and how I might ruin the aesthetic of the bridal party. I walked into that bridal boutique wearing a fitted black dress that highlighted my now toned body, my hair freshly cut and styled, my makeup subtle but flawless, a skill I'd practiced, watching countless YouTube tutorials. The look on my mother's face was worth every 5 a.m. alarm, every sore muscle, every hunger pang. Her jaw literally dropped. Melissa, who was already there, spilled champagne on her designer jeans. "Emma?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Is that you?" "Who else would it be, Mom?" I replied coolly, enjoying her shock perhaps more than I should have. The seamstress brought out the bridesmaid dress they'd ordered for me, size 18. I was now a size 6. "This won't work," the seamstress said, looking confused. "No," I agreed. "It won't." My mother recovered quickly, her surprise morphing into a smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Emma, you look wonderful. I knew you could do it if you just applied yourself." She turned to Melissa. "Doesn't your sister look amazing? All it took was a little motivation." And there it was, my transformation being co-opted as her parenting win, her foresight, her success story. But I wasn't the same pushover I had been. The months of discipline had hardened something in me. "Yes, it's amazing what spite can accomplish," I said with a sweet smile. "Now, about this dress." The wedding day approached, and so did something else I hadn't anticipated. My new LinkedIn profile caught the attention of a recruiter for a major tech company. They were impressed by my certification scores and my portfolio of sample work. After 3 rounds of interviews, they offered me a position with a salary that made me lightheaded when I saw the number. It was triple what I was making and twice what Melissa made. I accepted immediately, and my start date was set for the week after the wedding. I didn't tell my family. I was saving that little tidbit. The wedding day arrived, a perfect early summer day with blue skies and a gentle breeze. I looked good in the hastily altered bridesmaid dress. Really good. But it wasn't just my appearance that had changed. It was how I carried myself. I stood taller. I didn't shrink away from photos. I made eye contact when I spoke. During the reception, I was approached by one of Bradley's groomsmen, his cousin James, a charming doctor with kind eyes, who actually seemed interested in what I had to say. We danced and talked for hours. I caught my parents watching us, nudging each other with approving looks that made me want to scream. When it was time for the maid of honor speech, I took the microphone with confidence I'd never felt before. "For those who don't know me, I'm Emma, Melissa's sister," I began. "Many of you probably wouldn't recognize me from the family photos on our parents' mantle. I've changed a bit in the last year." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "I changed because I was told I needed to. Because I was told I wasn't good enough as I was. Because I was told I would embarrass my sister on her special day if I dared to exist in my former body." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. But you know what? In changing my outside, I discovered something about my inside. I discovered my worth isn't determined by a number on a scale or how I look in a bridesmaid dress. I discovered I'm capable of more than anyone in my family ever believed. I raised my glass. "So here's to Melissa and Bradley. May your marriage be built on acceptance and love that doesn't come with conditions. May you see each other's worth beyond the surface. And may you never change who you are just to please someone else." I caught my mother's horrified expression and my father's reddening face. Melissa looked stunned, but Bradley was nodding slightly, a thoughtful expression on his face. I sat down, heart pounding but feeling strangely light. James squeezed my hand under the table. The rest of the reception was tense. My mother cornered me by the bathroom later, hissing that I'd embarrass the family with my inappropriate speech. "Embarrassing the family used to be my specialty, wasn't it, Mom?" I replied calmly. "Oh, by the way, I got a new job. I start next week as a digital marketing manager at Horizon Tech. The salary is 6 figures. Just thought you might want to update your excuses about me still figuring things out for the next family gathering." I left her standing there, mouth agape, for the second time in 2 months. Over the next year, my life transformed in ways I never imagined. The new job wasn't just better pay, it was challenging, fulfilling work with people who valued my input. I moved to a beautiful apartment with a view of the city. James and I continued dating, our relationship deepening into something real and supportive. I maintained my weight loss, but in a healthier way. I exercised because it made me feel strong, not because I hated my body. I ate nourishing food because I deserved to feel good, not because I was punishing myself. I was thriving, and it drove my family crazy. Suddenly, my parents wanted to reconnect. They called regularly. They invited me to dinners. They mentioned me to their friends. I was now a success story they could brag about, another trophy on their shelf. Melissa's perfect life was showing cracks. Her job was stagnating while mine was advancing rapidly. Her marriage was struggling under the pressure of Bradley's medical residency hours. Meanwhile, James and I were planning a trip to Europe. During a holiday dinner at my parents' house about a year after the wedding, things finally came to a head. My mother was showing off my recent promotion to my aunt when she said something that stopped me cold. "We always knew Emma had potential, she just needed the right push." I told her she needed to lose weight for the wedding, and look how well everything turned out. Sometimes tough love is what these kids need. I set down my fork carefully. "Is that what you call it, Mom? Tough love?" Because I remember it as shame and conditional acceptance. I remember being told I was an embarrassment. My father tried to intervene. "Now, Emma, that's not fair. We were concerned about your health." "No, you were concerned about how I looked in wedding photos," I corrected him. "You were concerned about what your friends would think. Not once did anyone in this family ask if I was happy, if I was fulfilled, if I was healthy mentally. Not once." Melissa surprisingly spoke up. "She's right, Mom. We were awful to her. I was awful to her." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Em. I should have stood up for you." My mother huffed. "Well, you can't deny things worked out for the best. Look at you now. Successful, beautiful, dating a doctor." "I'm successful because I worked hard and discovered my own worth," I said firmly. "I'm dating James because he's kind and sees me, really sees me. And yes, I'm healthier now, but the way I got here was toxic and driven by your conditional love." I stood up from the table. "I didn't come here today for your approval. I don't need it anymore. I came to set boundaries. If you want me in your life, you need to accept that your tough love approach was damaging. You need to acknowledge that my worth was never tied to my size or my achievements." The silence around the table was deafening. "I love you all," I said, softening slightly, "but I love myself now too. And that's something I had to learn on my own despite this family, not because of it." I left that dinner feeling both drained and liberated. I didn't know if my relationship with my family would heal or fracture permanently, but for the first time, I was approaching it from a position of strength and self-worth, not desperate need for approval. That was 2 years ago. Today, things are different. My parents have gone to family therapy, reluctantly at first, but with increasing openness. My mother still occasionally makes tone-deaf comments, but now I can set boundaries without falling apart. My father has become more reflective, more willing to admit his mistakes. Melissa and I have built a real sisterhood for the first time. Her marriage improved after some counseling, and she's found a new career path that fulfills her. We've had long, hard conversations about our childhood and how differently we were treated. Healing those wounds has been painful, but worth it. James proposed 6 months ago under the Eiffel Tower during that European trip we planned. My engagement ring isn't as flashy as Melissa's, but our relationship isn't built on appearances. As for me, I'm still at Horizon Tech, now leading my own team. I've gained back about 15 pounds of the weight I lost, and I'm perfectly content with that. I've run 2 half marathons, not to be thin, but to feel strong. I mentor young women in tech and sometimes share my story, the real story, not the weight loss success version, but the journey to self-worth beyond the scale. The transformation my parents pushed for backfired in ways they never anticipated. They wanted a daughter who looked better in photos, who wouldn't embarrass them at social functions. Instead, they got a daughter who found her voice, who stopped seeking their approval, who built a life on her own terms. Sometimes I look at old photos of myself, the heavier me with the sad eyes and forced smile, and I wish I could tell her, your worth isn't measured in pounds. Your family's treatment of you is their failure, not yours. One day you'll be strong enough to set boundaries, to demand respect, to walk away if necessary. I may have lost the weight for all the wrong reasons, but in the process I found something far more valuable, myself. So for anyone reading this who recognizes their own family in mine, who feels measured and found wanting, who changes themselves to earn love that should be unconditional, know this: the day you stop trying to prove your worth to others is the day you begin to discover it for yourself. And that transformation is the one that really matters.